Paris. What a magnificent old city. From its historic landmarks, the smell of baguettes in the air. Oh, I think it's the Louvre over there. Wait a minute. Where are those people running from? Oh no! Welcome back, one and all, and thank you so much for joining me because today we are going to be going over the current #1 movie on all of Netflix, Under Paris. Now, it's no surprise to me that this movie was able to reach #1 on Netflix because as of recent and actually historically, monster flicks, specifically monster animal flicks, have always been an incredible success. I mean, all you need to do is look at the recent surge of some of the major franchises that have sprung up over the last few years, such as the Godzilla reboot, Planet of the Apes reboot, to see that people still love these animal horror type of movies here. I know Planet of the Apes isn't much of a horror, but I mean, to me, it's pretty horrific. The idea that monkey people take over the world. And not only that, it's not only huge here in the States, but I mean, over in Japan, they have an entire classification of movies called kaiju, which are just these giant monstrous beasts that humanity has to fight as much as they possibly can. If you want to look at a good modern interpretation of that, check out Pacific Rim. But either way, we are here to talk about Under Paris. Now, what is this movie even about? That's what we're going to go over today. So I always want to put it out there. There is going to be some major spoilers for this movie. So please, if you would rather just watch the movie first, then come back for the critique, I will always support that. I mean, I don't want to, again, have YouTube be your first experience to this if this is something you've been looking forward to watching. So go check it out, then come on back. I'll be here for you. Alrighty, so if you are now watching this part of the video, I'm going to say it's safe to assume you have now experienced the absolute gem that is Under Paris. I was unprepared for how just completely naff this entire movie was going to be until I watched it, because I had heard comparisons to Jaws as a reference, and well, I think it's best we just go through this together so you can really understand just how wrong that statement is. So the very first scene we see is a quote that is displayed across the entire screen, and it reads as follows. "The species that survive aren't the strongest species, nor are they the most intelligent, but rather the ones who best adopt to change." And then underneath, it says, based on Charles Darwin. And I think something as important as the theory of evolution itself is not something you should probably paraphrase. That is a very dangerous game that could lead to some misinterpretations that could be, well, frankly, devastating to society. So, yeah, maybe shouldn't be paraphrasing something like that. We then have our first actual scene of the movie after this quote, which is a bunch of scientists who are researching sharks at the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, if you don't know what this location is, I highly recommend looking into it because it is frankly a travesty that something like this exists in 2024. So part of this scientific group delves under the water to find a baby whale has been caught up in the netting that has been discarded as part of this garbage patch. And before long, a bunch of sharks end up showing up, including this massive mako shark they have lovingly named Lilith, who has somehow grown from 2.5 meters to 7 meters in a matter of 3 months. For some reason, they need a sample from Lilith. So one of the divers here takes this harpoon-like thing and just shanks her with it. And it sends, no surprise, Lilith into a murderous rampage, and she just shreds this whole scientific team that's in the water, with ease. At this point, our protagonist, Sophia, who is one of the lead scientists of this exposition, jumps into the water super late to try to save her comrades, and a standoff between her and Lilith occurs. And it's supposed to be really tense, but it just kind of gives off this weird, almost romantic vibe to it. In the scuffle, the net that's wrapped around Lilith's tail ends up catching Sophia's foot and just dragging her wicked far down into the ocean, causing her eardrums to actually pop, which is a pretty rad part of the movie because I wasn't expecting that. I'm glad that they had that attention to detail. As pointless as it is later on in the movie. We'll get to that though. Sophia somehow escapes this encounter, which is just so baffling to me because not only was she attacked by a 21-foot shark, she also was holding her breath for well over 2 minutes and had to swim. Wait, how far did she swim? How fast does a mako shark swim? Okay, that's pretty fast. So if a mako shark is traveling about 22 miles an hour at the slowest for 25 seconds downward, that would be... Apparently Sophia's a superhuman. Roll the title sequence! We then jump 3 years later where two boys are fishing a bunch of garbage out of the Seine River for some reason, and they end up catching an old artillery shell which is still active. Smartly, the police are actually called during this sequence, and they arrive being led by a man named Sergeant Adil, who then boards a police boat, and that is literally the whole scene. Nothing else happens. That is it. Cut to what we can assume to be a school field trip at an aquarium, where their tour is being led by Sophia of all people. We love that. Her eardrums are totally fine. She can hear totally fine. It's great. I can't really explain how that one works, but we can't explain how she swam over 800 feet up either. So, with that aside, one of these shitty little kids decides to ask her, and I quote, "The internet says your whole team was eaten by sharks. Is that true?" Sophia has legit nothing to say back to this question and just walks out of the aquarium super depressed. She's followed by this woman we end up finding out her name is Mika, who tells Sophia to come with her because she has been studying her work she did with sharks, and Sophia's eventually convinced to go with Mika when she brings up Beacon 7, otherwise known as the GPS tracker that Sophia's old team had placed on her. Together, these two women walk to this old-ass mansion, which Mika reveals to be the headquarters of her organization, SOS, otherwise known as Save Our Seas.
Yeah, we're badass.
Yeah, it's pretty cringy. Either way, she reveals that their whole organization is based around the credence of Sophia's teachings on sharks, and they're trying to protect them from being poached, I guess. It's really hard to tell what they're even doing here and how they're doing it, because it doesn't really ever explain how they're saving these sharks other than they're using the GPS trackers that Sophia's team had put on sharks throughout the years. But that's about the amount of clarity you get. At this point, we're introduced to Ben, who's the only other important SOS member throughout the entirety of this story. And together, Ben, Sophia, and Mika track down Lilith's location to find she has somehow swam all the way up the Seine River into Paris. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, how can a shark that can only breathe salt water somehow survive in the Seine River, which is entirely freshwater? Well, folks, the movie gives you an answer to that question. And their answer is... pollution. Let's hear that Mika's inner eco-warrior really comes out strong, and she defends Lilith's behaviors by saying, oh, she's just lost up the river and she's trying to find her way back home and survive, which is really screwed up when you realize she's saying this to Sophia, whose entire crew and husband was murdered by this particular shark, and she clearly hasn't gotten over it yet. So the fact that the very next thing that Mika asks is for Sophia to help them is just kind of despicable if you think about it. Unsurprisingly, Sophia walks away from this and rejects the offer. Cut to Sophia's refrigerator, which is frankly the saddest scene of this movie so far. I mean, I have seen college fraternities with more nutrition in their fridge than this woman. She ends up having this little sad moment with her trauma trunk, and it pulls her just right back into that shark madness. We go back to Ben and Mika, who are now at Lilith's alleged location, and they share a nice little smooch just to let you know that they're in a relationship before Mika jumps into the water and investigates this car crash. The police end up showing up and Mika unclips her safety line so that Ben can escape. The police end up picking up Mika and start bringing her back to the station because I guess it's illegal to swim in the Seine at this time of night or something. I don't know French law, dude. Then we get the most pointless part of this movie where the police end up speaking to this homeless guy and his cute little dog. And while the dog is adorable, it does literally nothing to move this story forward and frankly just kind of ends up feeling like a fluff scene. Finally, back at the station, Mika gets like the most gentle interrogation I have ever seen from Sergeant Adil before they're nearly immediately interrupted. Back to Sophia again, who has apparently been tracking Lilith herself all night long and into the next day before she's confronted by Sergeant Adil and Mika for some reason, even though she was being interrogated, and they're now part of an active crime scene. Upon approaching, Sophia sees the crime scene has been a shark attack on this guy, which sends her into a total PTSD trip here. And for some reason, the police still don't believe that a shark did this because it's quote unquote impossible, even though there's obvious signs of a shark attack here, including bite marks in the car that we saw before. So I don't know, man. The police are really stupid in this movie. And once again, our most tone-deaf character, Mika, has to throw in her little eco-warrior spiel about Lilith's safety, because the police say if she does exist, they're gonna kill it. Which, you can't do that because it's
one of the most beautiful creatures that's out there and certainly doesn't pose a danger to anyone unless it's defending itself or hungry.
2 problems with that.
First off, the shark has been in fresh water for at least 3 days now. So why weren't you doing anything before Sophia entered the scene? Second issue, this shark is not harmless. It has killed 3 people at least, and most likely 4. Just to basically stop Sophia's complaining, the police agree to look for the shark as Sophia ends up joining them and Mika ends up following them on a bike. They end up turning off the GPS tracking signal at the SOS headquarters because Mika is afraid that the shark will be murdered by the police if it's found. Lilith does actually show up for a brief moment here, giving the police the evidence they need to prove that she is indeed in the Seine River. However, they immediately turn on Sophia and blame her for turning off the tracking beacon. For some reason, they think she's the only person that could have done this. And so she storms off the boat with a nosebleed because I guess her sinuses or her eardrums, whatever it was that exploded when she was dragged under the ocean all those years ago, is still giving her problems. Or at least when it's convenient for the story. Sophia realizes that the only people that could have turned off the tracking beacons was the SOS, so she immediately goes to their headquarters and confronts Mika and Ben, who then gaslight the absolute shit out of her, with Mika even going as far as saying that the reason her husband and crew died is because they were trespassing in Lilith's territory.
Bruh.
Sergeant Adil then begins looking into Sophia's past, only to pan down to see a photo of his old army squadron, which he just immediately flips down. The tone of the movie then takes a drastic turn when Mika puts out an Instagram video of sharks being killed and her going on this long speech of how people need to take back control of the planet. And it goes viral immediately, getting a staggering 144,756 likes. Man, I need to get into shark activism. We then get the most epic line of the entire movie when at the end of her video, Mika drops the line, "If we save the shark, we save the world." Sophia and Adil then approach the mayor of Paris to let her know about Lilith being in the Seine River, but the mayor just completely disregards everything because apparently there's this huge triathlon that's being run this week, and instead she'd rather just tuck her head in the sand and talk about just how wonderful she really is. The mayor basically continues on explaining that they've spent way too much money on the event and that the police and Sophia just kind of need to figure it out without her assistance, and they need to do it quickly. If you couldn't tell, the mayor is maybe just a tidbit smug.
We have to go! Being smug is a good thing. Oh my Christ!
Feeling a bit frustrated, Adil and Sophia leave the mayor's office and are nearly immediately confronted by Ben, who informs them she was able to reactivate the tracking beacon for Lilith, and that she has somehow swam her way into the catacombs under Paris, giving us the title of the movie, Under Paris.
Ugh.
Not wanting to waste any time, Sophia and the police prepare themselves and go into the catacombs after Lilith, just to find that at least 20 eco-warriors who showed up in only 3 kayaks were already there, including Mika and Ben somehow, who was literally just with them the scene before. It doesn't make any sense at all. None of this makes any sense. This is becoming a ridiculous movie so fast. Mika then puts a sonar ball into the water and jumps in because allegedly that's supposed to attract the shark. And as she does that, the police and Sophia break into the party here. At this point in time, Lilith does show up as well as a baby shark?
What?
I just want to take this moment to say we are only halfway through this hour and 45-minute long movie about a giant shark, and we have only had one shark attack sequence, and the rest has just been, well, you know.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine. You just can't get into it because they would never.
So literally not even 2 minutes after Adil told everybody not to cause a panic, he panics and jumps into the water to save Mika before she is immediately devoured by Lilith. Finally. Everybody freaks out, and what begins one of the stupidest scenes of carnage I have ever watched in a movie ensues, including the following highlights. Ben drowns after getting repeatedly pushed into the water. A lot of eco-warriors lose limbs. The sergeant unloads his gun into the now human-infested water, and one of the police gets horribly mauled by Lilith. We cut to the victims of the attack here in the hospital, and everybody's all sorts of beaten up. Sophia's feeling super guilty for some reason, like this is her fault. And then Adil comes and sits next to her and offers her candy to cheer her up, while also placing his hand on her thigh and arm. He's touched her a few times at this point when she didn't want it, and it feels like he should be driving more of a white van than a police car at this point. Sophia and the police then return to the catacombs to find that the baby shark is dead. We then cut to a laboratory where Sophia is performing an autopsy on the baby shark, and she finds 4 important pieces of information. First off, that the shark is 2 months old. Second off, the shark is pregnant. And third off, the shark is hermaphroditic, which leads to the 4th point: this is a new species of shark. With this new information, Adil and Sophia then go to the mayor's office, where they are once again just completely chastised by the mayor because apparently this is all their fault. She once again refuses to help them and says they're going on with the triathlon as planned anyways, and the protective services of the city of Paris are going to be handed over to the military instead of the police now. Which, I'll be honest, I didn't know the mayor of Paris had the ability to do that. Feeling defeated by the mayor, Sophia and the police retire to a cafe where everybody's just in street clothes bitching about politics for a little bit. Adil and Sophia end up sitting at the bar where we finally get some background to Adil's character a little bit more, and it's not very nice. We find out the reason why he flipped down that picture from earlier was because that was his squadron from when he was in the army, and they went on a rescue mission, which he flaked out of because he was afraid of dying. And essentially, a bunch of people in that mission were casualties in one form or another. So he's just all really upset and moody about that. But it's like, dude, you went AWOL on a mission. You should feel bad about that. You knew what you were signing up for with the military, bro. It's not like it's a hidden thing. And I think the worst thing about this whole sequence is they try to make it seem like Sophia and Adil's situations are the same thing. Like, I didn't know going AWOL and having a bunch of your friends get hurt because you literally abandoned them in a time of war was the same thing as having your husband get murdered by a shark. Those aren't the same thing, guys. But I guess Sophia doesn't mind because she totally accepts this whole situation. Realizing that they're on their own on this, but they still have to do something, Sophia and the police hatch a Mission Impossible-like plan to blow up the catacombs where the sharks made their nest. Shark's nest? Shark's nest? Just like that.
The mission begins.
Finally, this overhyped triathlon actually begins, and the mayor just continues to sniff her own farts. Meanwhile, the police and Sophia are in the catacombs, and one of them lights a flare, revealing that there's just tons and tons of sharks. Now, as we enter the final leg of this movie, the one plus that I can give it is that it does up the ante with the amount of shark attacks that happen, which is pretty cool. But honestly, other than that, I'll just let you form your own opinions as to how this movie ends, because it is quite something. So the next thing that happens is all the explosives are placed, and the guy that's holding the detonator gets just ravaged and ripped apart super melodramatically by sharks. Another police officer swims down to get it, and he's also eaten up by a shark. And then Adil gives out this really terrible Darth Vader-esque "No!" It turns out they didn't really even need a detonator anyway because the bombs were set to a 3 minutes timer. So they just explode and go off. And then this happens for seemingly no reason at all. Adil climbs on board the police boat, but Sophia wants to go check to make sure all the sharks are dead. Spoiler, they're not. We then get my favorite scene of the entire movie where Lilith shoots out of the ruins and hits underneath the police boat, launching just everybody like 10 feet up in the air and then come crashing back down into the water. It's super funny how they framework this, and whatever effects they were using clearly were not very high quality because it's a pretty laughably bad scene. After double bouncing these police officers, Lilith goes flying towards these swimmers in the Seine River for the triathlon, breaking through what must be the shittiest metal chains of all time. And one by one, she starts picking people off. And it takes a legitimate 30 seconds before anyone notices the literal 21-foot shark in the river killing swimmers. With just the most reckless abandon, the military begins popping shots off into the water like crazy, trying to hit Lilith, I guess, completely ignoring all the humans that are still trying to swim out of the water here. And in an act of what I can only describe as ridiculous intelligence, Lilith somehow kicks up these old artillery shells still in the Seine River from, you remember the beginning of the movie? Those guys, and massive, massive explosions ensue, causing a tidal wave to crush through the middle of Paris and just create this desolate water wasteland. For the final shot of the movie, we see Adil and Sophia as the only two people to survive this massive tidal wave of explosions that happened. And it just pans out to reveal that Paris is now flooded and filled with sharks. And that's it. That ends the movie. That was Under Paris. So now that we know the story of Under Paris, let's dig into how we actually felt about it. And if it's not apparent, it's not my cup of tea. I'll put it that way. I was expecting Jaws and I got more Sharknado. So that's where we ended up. And I'll about to explain why I feel that way here. Starting off, this is a very oversaturated market. I mean, giant killer shark movies have been done to death and back. And 2024 is a very late time to hop in that market. I mean, I just named two without even thinking about it. Second, the tone of this is very oppressive and it's meant to be taken seriously. But my God, you cannot take much of this story seriously at all. The whole premise stops making sense. Like when you meet SOS for the first time, like any hope goes right out the window. You have like these eco warriors that are, again, I don't even know how they're saving sharks because it's just a GPS tracker that's on them, but they're able to somehow stop poachers from hunting them through the GPS tracker, which just frankly doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm too stupid and too unknowledgeable about this topic. If you know why this is the case, like, please let me know in the comments, because I have been racking my brain as to what the heck is going on. I mean, there's a part of me that thought it was them mind controlling the sharks through their computer. Like, I honestly have no idea. So, like, any assistant would be, thank you so much, everybody. But going back to the characters, there is only one character in this entire movie that's actually likable, and that is the main character, fortunately, Sophia. You just really feel bad for her most of the time. I mean, she makes a couple airheaded decisions here and there, but all forgivable stuff when everybody else is so incredibly unlikable. I mean, Adil seems like he's going to be a good guy until you get his backstory. And the fact he just keeps touching Sophia without, like, asking her or getting consent or anything. And then you have Mika. And Mika is just such an unlikable character, especially for what she's supposed to be representing, because this has a huge environmental overtone to this entire movie, talking about topics like global warming and pollution and poaching. So you would think that you would want to shed an organization that is like in support of, fixing that whole thing in a positive light, and they just do not with Mika. She seems like a cult leader. She is just so horribly unlikable to talk to. The fact that she even has a girlfriend is frankly amazing to me, which leads me to Ben. Ben seemed like an okay character, maybe a little wishy-washy, a little torn, which I wish they had dug into a little bit more for some character depth, but she's so unimportant in the grand scheme of this entire movie. It's just easy to forget about her, which is so sad, because she actually does a decent job as an actress, too. And the acting is all right. Honestly, it's obvious. I don't think a lot of these people have had a lot of acting gigs in the past, which is fine. I mean, I love seeing new actors get out there and work their magic, but I'm sorry. It's just, when everything else is so terrible, it doesn't do a lot if the acting isn't phenomenal, because otherwise it's just another throwaway part of this movie. Ultimately, I cannot say I recommend it. How it ever got to the #1 spot on Netflix is beyond me. You don't have to just take my word for it, because I didn't watch this movie alone. Yes, someone else sat through and suffered this intolerable shark movie with me, and I would like to invite them in to give their opinion now. So why don't you come on in, hon? Oh, jeez. This is Metacarpal Magic here, joining me for yet another review. So Meta sat with me through this whole terrible movie. You all know my thoughts at this point. Why don't you share yours?
This movie was definitely not my favorite. It took very long to get to the whatever point it was really trying to get to.
I think it's putting it lightly. Yeah. Killer Shark movie took a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, again, it's just been so overdone. I'm quite sick of seeing so many shark movies come out like every single summer, or like every other summer. It's either a crocodile or like
flashback to Lake Placid.
Placid, Crawl. That might be one of the next ones to go over after this.
Yes, that would be a good. I don't know. I need a break from these animal horrors.
We need a second from the environmental horror movies. Which, by the way, if this is supposed to be a horror movie, I was not scared at all.
No. Oh, I didn't even mention that. I don't think I had a single scared moment Not a single shiver went down the spine.
The one thing I will say, and I give them a little bit of credit towards, is that there was one part in the beginning when Sophia was being dragged underwater, like super, super deep, and like one of her or both of her eardrums exploded.
That part is dope,
like,
though.
It definitely was done well enough that it was uncomfortable.
We have learned through delving through this, isn't this for everyone, that this movie just doesn't make sense on many, many levels.
Yeah.
Including why you would ever watch this and why it became number one on Netflix.
I think that a lot of the times for number one movies on Netflix, it's just because it's something new and maybe a lot of people are watching it.
And Conspiracy, it was put out by Netflix.
Yeah. And I don't know if that many people are actually enjoying this, but at least I can say that there is a good message behind, like, wanting to help the ocean in some way.
Oh, yeah. Maybe just don't make your eco group, like, the worst people in the entire movie.
Yeah, very culty. It just was not... Like,
we suddenly became Midsommar so quick.
So quick. I saw Jim Jones in her eyes a little bit. Not to say drink the Kool-Aid.
Drink the shark water. The catacomb water.
One more note, too, about the movie. Like, disgusting that there was a triathlon happening in this polluted...
Oh, yes. So gross.
Who wants to swim in that? Like, I get it's for charity, but there's no other places that would be better for that.
Also, I just need to point out, too, like, I know it's a deep river, but, like... You know, there are active artillery in the river, too, like, for a long time, by the looks of it at this point. How in the world was this just not barred completely? Like, if you know there's active explosives in your river, you're having people swim in there? You know, people dive. Like, they can dive down to the bottom.
There's potential that could happen. Or, those guys who were fishing for garbage, or I guess, like, kind of metal detecting type of thing, like, just looking for stuff.
Yeah, it might have set one off, honestly.
Yeah,
yeah, poor man's going fishing and accidentally blows up all of Paris.
We did look it up, but that they do find sometimes artillery in the water at the ends. But
pretty few, far and few, yeah.
But it's pretty few and far between. It's just was so the pacing of this movie and the different plot lines, just so many things trying to converge at once that just didn't quite mesh, and characters that just really didn't have much in common being made to be put together.
And horribly unlikable, too, for a while.
Yeah, most all of them were pretty bad. Like,
yeah. So I gotta ask you, thank you for your honest review here. I gotta ask, if we're giving a 1 out of 10 sharks, where does this land on your shark scale?
I think this lands at, like, 2 sharks.
2 sharks.
I give it 2, maybe 3 sharks if I'm being generous. I give it 2 because... At least, again, it was trying to have, like, a decent message in between all of the mess. And the acting wasn't too bad.
Wait, what part did you consider to be the mess?
The movie itself.
The whole movie.
Yeah. Clearly. It was not... It's not even... It's hard because, like, it is a movie that I could see watching with friends and, like, having a fun time, like, going over all of the plot holes and, like, things that are in it, but it's also one of those movies where, like, it's trying to have its cake and eat it too, where it's trying to be
very, very serious.
But then at the same time throws in, like, a giant shark leaping out of the water and, like capsizing a boat.
Best scene of the movie.
Like, the thought of, like, this giant shark swimming in the catacombs of all places, which aren't that big. And, like, again, her being Lilith, the mother of demon shark. Pollution is bad, but most of the time, you know, animals die from it.
Yeah.
They don't suddenly mutate. And I just wish that there was more story as to maybe why Sophia is getting this comeuppance in ways. Like, where it's like, I'm creating a more plot for this movie, which is typically a bad sign for a movie if you're trying to create more for it to have context. But if she in some way had been experimenting on the shark to try and make it stronger to live in polluted waters rather than just trying to, I don't know, like, just trying to mutate it in some way, and that led to, like, furthering it when it entered, like, actual polluted waters. Something like that still doesn't make too much sense, but a little bit more reasonable. It just falls flat in a lot of areas for me.
It certainly earned that 2 out of 10 sharks by the sounds of it. Yeah, with that, I'm going to have to say, you know what, I'm going to have to say two minnows out of 100. Two minnows. It's because the only two minnows are the for the shark attacks themselves. Like I said, unfortunately though, if you're looking for good shark attacks, this really isn't necessarily a great movie for it either. I mean, the first scene is like the biggest, best shark attack of the whole thing. It feels the scariest if you're like a sharkophobe. I don't know what the proper term for that is, but you're afraid of sharks. The first scene might get you a little bit because the idea that, you know, like you were saying, Meta, the net getting wrapped around your ankle, getting dragged to the depths, like that's kind of scary. You know, the fact that I don't think you can swim 800 feet upwards. I certainly can't.
No,
I know I can't.
Especially like you have to acclimate your body as you go if you scuba dive.
Oh, and hold your breath?
And hold your breath. It's a whole process, but I guess since her eardrums are already fucked, she just was like, I'm fine.
She's like, I got it. You know what?
Like,
It's fine.
It's
fine, man.
Up, and I don't care if my lungs collapse.
Yeah, I'm also apparently a world champion swimmer and have the invincibility of Superman to be able to survive all that.
Yeah, I wish there was more as to why this project is happening, more insight to that. If it's her just privately doing this or if it's connected to something bigger. Again, many questions that are unanswered, but maybe that's just the fun of Under Paris. You know, honestly, I will say, if Under Paris, the last comment I will make, if it hammed it up, like it just totally didn't take itself seriously, this would have been a much funner romp, honestly, because it, like I said, the tone is really what kills this movie at the end of the day. It tries to be serious and it's just so incredibly silly. The premise is silly. The enemy is silly. The characters are all very silly caricatures. You know what I mean? Like even Sophia, who is the most relatable and the one you feel the worst for, at the end of the day, she just is kind of the caricature of like a sad woman whose family got killed by sharks. Yeah, again, she also doesn't always make the best decisions clearly in the movie, and as much as you can feel bad for her, there's levels of frustration with her too.
100%. 100%.
Again, out of everyone, her and Ben are probably the most likable characters. And again,
Absolutely.
I agree with what you were saying, that Ben is just one of those characters where I wish I'd gotten more from her. She just was very, she was very good at acting, or pretty good at acting, and I just thought there could be more for her and her story. But
well, who knows? I mean, maybe she will be coming out more in the French movie scene. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know any of these actors. I don't watch a lot of French cinema. I mean, if they are new actors, I hope the best for them. You know, one performance shouldn't determine your career. So,
yeah, and I'm glad that another foreign film is getting more attention. Because in the U.S. there isn't much. Well, it's starting to get more into foreign films, but. So there is that aspect that's also good. I just wish it was a better foreign film.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with that, Meta, thank you so much for joining me for this final review. And thank you even more so for struggling through that movie with me. I really appreciate it.
It was hard at some points, but we made it through.
And thank you all for watching this entire video. If you haven't yet, please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, because we're pushing out videos every single week up in here. And if you haven't yet, please give us a follow over on Instagram at TheDanielBlake1 over on Instagram. And thank you one final time. I wish you just have the most wonderful day. Deuces!